Greetings and welcome. My name is Mike Bankhead. I am your host. I am a bass player and songwriter from the Gem City, Dayton, Ohio. My guest on today's episode is singer, songwriter, guitarist, rock and roll musician Buick Audra, who is currently based in Nashville, Tennessee. You're going to enjoy getting to know her on the You Could Be My Aramis podcast. Welcome to episode 109. I really enjoyed this conversation with Buick. Sorry it took me so long to get it posted. I think you're going to like her too. Let's get to the conversation. Hey there, Buick. Happy Sunday.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy Sunday to you.
Real briefly, could you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Buick Audra. I'm a musician and songwriter and weirdo in Nashville, Tennessee. I play under my own name, Buick Audra, and I also play in the metal band Friendship Commanders.
That's very good. Clearly, you've said that a lot in your rehearse. You're actually from Miami, though, right?
I am. I'm from Miami. I've lived here for a while. They're very different cultures.
Yeah.
It's been wild.
You are at the moment on tour, and you're taking a break at home for a couple of days. So I would like to thank you on the record for taking time out of your actual real life while you're trying to rest up before you have to go back on the road. But I want to talk about why you're on tour. You just released an album as Friendship Commanders, your band.
Yep.
It is called
Yep.
Mass. Now, Mass is not referring to an object's inertia, nor is it referring to that thing that Catholics do on Sunday. It is the state of Massachusetts, and this is the concept album about Massachusetts. So why? Why a concept album about Massachusetts?
Actually, I want to say that all of the definitions apply, which is why we chose to call it Mass, and all of the definitions are inside the gatefold of the cover, and inside the book that I wrote to accompany the record. I do think that the language matters, and I'm obsessed with language. So I wrote this album about a year and 3 months after my friend Mark Orleans died by suicide in 2020. Mark was somebody who I first came to know when I was living in Massachusetts when I was a teenager. I'm not from Massachusetts. As you said, I'm from Miami, but I was moved to Massachusetts several times by my parental figures in my childhood and adolescence. Moved around a lot, kicked out, moved back, all sorts of stuff. And so it was never a place that I chose. It was just a place that I ended up because of other people's decisions. And, Massachusetts and Florida are very different cultures. I should say Miami specifically. Miamians tend to only identify as being from Miami, not Florida. But, I did my best with what I had at the time. I came into my young adulthood in Massachusetts. And for a long time, like so many things about our lives, what happened there just lived in my mind as kind of like, oh, it's just life. That's just the weird stuff that happened in my late teens and early 20s. And it wasn't until Mark died and I was grieving his passing. Mark was an incredible musician and person and noise rock guitar player, improv guitar player. When he died, I found myself unable to move through the grief with any kind of ease, like in a way that was new for me. So I sat down and really just meditated on our time together. And in the process of doing that, really reflected on the chapter during which I'd first come to know him. And it looked a lot stranger to me from here than it ever had. It looked very extreme and very high impact.
That's what we're doing.
I want to apologize because you were saying something really interesting and it just wasn't coming through, and then I got really sad.
That's okay.
How do we go back and recapture that magic? You were talking about Massachusetts and what it meant to you and why this album has that title.
Yeah. So you were saying that there were definitions that maybe don't apply, definitions of mass. And I'm saying that I think they all do apply, and I made sure to put them all on the inside of the vinyl gatefold, as well as inside the book that I wrote that accompanies the LP. Massachusetts is a state that I was moved to several times as a kid. I was moved around by several different parental figures, and therefore it was a place I never chose, which I feel like is an important distinction to make. I just ended up there and did my best with it. And like so many things about our lives, just considered the things that happened to me in my chapter there to be just my life. I hadn't ever really looked back with any type of scrutiny or interest in how formative it was. And then a friend of mine named Mark Orleans passed away in the summer of 2020. He died by suicide. And in the process of grieving him, which I think will be ongoing for the rest of my life, but in the immediate months and year after his death, I looked back at the time that I had gotten to know him originally and was like, that was a really high impact time. And it happened in Boston. It happened in the Boston music community, the rock community at the time. And I realized that it had shaped huge parts of my identity, both musically and personally and emotionally. And so I started to write first about losing Mark, and then from there about the surrounding culture. And before I knew it, I was writing a concept record, an autobiographical record. And I said to Jerry Rowe, the drummer in Friendship Commanders and my bandmate, I said, I think that this is one cohesive body of work, and I think we should call it Mass. And he trusted me with that, and he trusts me as a songwriter, which I really appreciate. And we started to work it out. And we oddly already had studio dates in Salem, Massachusetts booked to work with Kurt Ballou at his God City studio. So it just felt like this prophetic, weird thing that we were making this record about Massachusetts, and we're then going to Massachusetts to actually record it with a Massachusetts man, born and raised. So that's how that came to be, and that's how we are here together today.
And I discovered it because you ran an ad on Meta.
Yep.
I was doom scrolling Instagram, which one does? And I heard,
which we do.
And I heard the song Blue, and I didn't know that's what the song was called at first, but I heard the song and it made me stop, because I was like, oh, I like this. And proof that you independent artists out there, it can work if you do it right. Because Friendship Commanders, you guys got yourself at least one more fan because of that. And hopefully people will listen to this and we move to check the music out. Blue is track 1 on Mass.
It is.
What's that about?
So Blue, I always say, is like the thesis statement of the album. I thought it should go first, because even though it was written close to last, when I was sort of summarizing the whole thing for myself and anybody else who might listen, the thesis statement is that if you don't yet have the language for what you want to say, you will. Because my life in Massachusetts was intense in a way that I did not have language around at the time. And when I looked back this time and wrote this record, it was so helpful for me to frame some of the relationships and experiences as what they were, as abusive, as narcissistic, and to see myself as a younger person who comes from an abusive background, not knowing how to navigate those things with any sort of emotional awareness or ease. And so I wanted to start the record, about this intense chapter by saying, like, you can get out. I'm free, I'm alive, and that's available to all of us. I felt like starting the record with a declaration of freedom was the most powerful way to then look back and be like, this is what happened, but I'm still alive.
Nice. Vampire is in 7/4, right?
It is.
That's awesome. Not every rock and roller wants to go that creative and do that, but it, as someone who occasionally dabbles in goofy time signatures, it kind of jumped out to me, and I totally dug that.
Thank you.
I don't want to go through every song because I want people to have to go listen to the record, but one more that I want to talk about in detail is the album closer.
Yeah.
Which is not so much sung as recited. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that track is called Dissonance, and it is a 5-ish minute spoken word piece that I wrote after we recorded the music. I actually wrote most of it in the van on the way home from making the album, but I knew that I would write it. It was odd. I remember being in the studio with Kurt and saying, there's something else that's going to happen. So I actually came back to Nashville and sang the record. I tracked myself here. I did not track the vocals with Kurt. I don't usually track vocals with recording engineers. I did with Steve Albini, and we can circle back to that. But that was a sort of a special and specific circumstance. I like to record myself for a number of reasons. And I had said to him, there are 9 songs, but I'm going to write this other thing. And I knew that there was something else to be said. And I somehow knew it wasn't going to be done with music. And again, like Jerry was just sort of like, okay, we'll see what happens. And Dissonance really for me was moving past some of just the trauma of the time and also sharing some of the beauty that I was able to remember as well when I was in the process of writing the album, some of the stuff from my much younger years, my childhood there, and talking about just how formative the time and place was for me. And that not all stories are bad stories, but multiple things can be true, that we can have beauty and we can have injury at the same time, and we don't have to pick one lane or the other. But so much of my life was informed by people saying like, well, but you're a resilient person now, and everything that happens for a reason. All these sort of nonsense maxims that people toss around to people who have survived things. And I think they're careless, and I think they're dangerous. I think we should be able to hold other people's stories and our own with a degree of care and say, I'm sorry that happened, and say this to ourselves, like, I'm sorry that happened. And I'm glad that you can remember some of the good too. We don't have to choose one or the other. So Dissonance was really making that statement, both for the album and just for myself.
It's a powerful piece. It's not something that you should put on listeners. You shouldn't put that one on in the background and just let it. I mean, you really should pay attention to what Buick is saying in that piece. And honestly, for the entire record, paying attention to the lyrics is something that I think as listeners you should do to get the full experience. But not
Thank
only
you.
did you write all of these songs and you have a cohesive theme, you've also kind of built a bigger artistic project around it. As you mentioned briefly, you wrote a whole book to go with it.
I did.
You did the art, so you're like a multiple artistic thread. Visual art, lyrical art, musical art, and an author. Talk about the book just really quick, please.
Sure. So the book is a memoir and essays that follows the structure of the album. So the essays are each named for the songs in the same order that the songs appear on the album, or the pieces, I should say. And it's actually my second memoir and essays. I wrote one to accompany a solo album that was released a year ago called Conversations with My Other Voice. And I found that process the first time around to be very difficult, but also a good way of telling the stories through 2 mediums, giving people a music version of the memoir and then a prose version. I think they help each other. I think they stand alone as independent works, but I think that there is like an interesting opportunity to experience the stories in 2 ways by the same writer. The book is like 200 pages long. It's not like, a Stephen King novel where you have to sit there for half of your life. And, I hear it's a quick read. For me, it's not a quick read because I edited it 70 times, literally. But, I hear out in the world people that read it, they're like, I read it in one sitting. And that's good to hear as a writer, that it snags someone. The worst thing that could ever happen if you write a body of prose is that people can't make it through the first couple of pages and abandon ship, But yeah, for me, it was about being like, these stories exist first in song and second in prose, but I do think that there's power in a sort of longer form version if people are interested. And there's a lot of work in the book about my understanding of friendship on the other side of making this body of work, gender and friendship, power dynamics and friendship. And it's funny that our band is called Friendship Commanders, which was not why we named the band that, but now we really have become a band that make and release work about friendship. So that's what the book really is about.
So if someone wanted to buy the album on vinyl and the book together as a bundle, where would we send them to do that?
To our Bandcamp. Bandcamp, you can buy both. For now, the book has not been globally distributed. My first one has. You can buy the first book like on, all those book buying sites like Bookshop and Amazon and all those places. But right now, mass is just available through us.
All right. That's friendshipcommanders.bandcamp.com. Or I'm imagining that if they come to a show, they might be able to get some.
Yeah, we have both at the merch table, and it's wild. The book really draws people in. I guess people don't see books on merch tables that often, so it really turns some heads.
So tell me about tour. You're out on the road taking this album to the people. How's that going?
It's going, I think, better than any touring we've ever done prior. Thanks for asking. So the tour is 6 weeks total. We're 3 weeks down, 3 weeks to go. And we're just about to start the western half of the tour. I don't know when this episode will air, but we'll be in the time machine one way or the other. But yeah, we're starting west in Salt Lake City, and then we'll do a lot of the West Coast and come back across the bottom, like through Texas and Arizona and all that. And we have not been that way since 2019, since before the pandemic.
So you're due.
Yeah, we are overdue, and really grateful to be doing it. As you said when we first got on the call, like touring is a privilege and a grind, and not something that we all have had access to as a people for several years, but also like, there are financial barriers to touring. I certainly haven't been able to tour for a lot of my life. But this record meant so much to us that we really wanted to be able to go and do this live, especially after not touring for so much of the pandemic.
And you tour as a two-piece.
We do.
Kind of like Local H, but I'm assuming, actually, I'm curious to know what your guitar setup is like. How are you getting some of that low end into your sound?
Okay, so my guitar setup is that I split my signal out of my pedal board. So the exact same signal. I do not use like, an octave, this, that, or the third. So the same signal comes out of my pedal board. One line goes to an original series Fender Blues Deluxe. I think she's a 1993. I am not her original owner. The other is going to a 1980s Mesa Bass 400 amp that is going through a 215 Sun Cab from, I think, the 60s. So the low end is really being carried by the Mesa Bass, and then the tooth, I always say, of my tone is happening through that Blues Deluxe. Those Fender amps, it's like a 112, speaker, but they have a lot of fight in them, especially that particular generation. So that's what I'm doing. And I play through a series of pedals, of course. But we're loud as shit on stage. And we have had many, many, many people come up to us over the years and be like, "You don't miss a bass player." And I'm like, "Thank you." I know you are a bass player, so we might miss you.
I get a little offended every time I see a band with no bass, but if it works for you, it works for you.
I'll tell you, I don't think we would be able to tour if we had one more person, both logistically and financially. That's another part about touring.
Oh, right. It's more mouth to feed, more gear, more stuff in the car. I get
more
it.
Places to sleep to be found every single night. I mean, everybody is a whole new project on the road.
Yeah, being able to do it as a two-piece, I can see how that's a lot more efficient.
Yes.
And, you did record with the bass on the record, yeah?
Yeah, we do. We always have, but we don't do it live. We never have. I shouldn't say we never have. In the very early days of Friendship Commanders, we thought we would be a three-piece, and we had a couple people play bass with us, and it was not as cool. And I will go on record as saying kind of unpleasant. They were all cis men, and they all treated me like I was secondary in my own band.
That's kind of weird. You're the boss if it's your band.
Correct.
That's very strange.
Yes. Have I mentioned I live in Nashville? Women and brown people, not really the town for. No.
Not really the town. it's a nice place to visit, but I could never live there, and just kind of the way things are there really bugs me. And
Same. And I'm
yeah,
pretty loud about it. Yeah.
as you should be.
Yeah.
So, are you thinking about extending this tour perhaps into next year?
Oh, yes, we will absolutely do the second big push of it in the springtime and maybe beyond. We are already booking the spring. We were able to book 30 shows on this first tour this year that we're doing right now. But no, we haven't hit New York City yet. We haven't hit a lot of places that we will go back and do a second big push for.
All right, here's hoping that you swing back through the Midwest, because I would like to go catch a show.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
Buick, you're my first guest that owns 2 Grammys. And I am a baby rookie member of the Academy. I just joined this year.
Nice.
And I mean, that's like beyond the wildest dreams, obviously, is to get that kind of recognition from your peers. But what does that feel like? And can you tell me how you managed to get your hands on 2 Grammys? What kind of excellent work did you do to get recognized?
So it's a crazy story, and I actually tell it in my first book, the one that I talked about publishing last year. It feels bizarre. I mean, I grew up really caring about Grammys and thinking that was like something that we are all supposed to want and get and all that kind of stuff. I got 2 Grammys by doing something that I did not enjoy at all. And it involves a British singer named Joss Stone, who I had a years-long collaborative project with that is largely impossible to find. We made an album together that was a duets album that we wrote and produced together and worked on for literal years, mostly in her hometown of Devon, England. So I was over there on her turf for the entirety of the project. And it was rough. I actually started having panic attacks over there. I was on Joss's schedule, and in her world, Joss likes to work through the night. And I do not, and it was not good for my body or my mental health. And we wrote 14, recorded 16 songs together, which is rather a lot. And then it didn't get put out. But one of the tracks, which we did not write, got pulled by her label at the time and added to a gospel compilation, which is hilarious because I am an atheist. And that, as soon as it happened, I said, we're going to get nominated for a Grammy. And we did. And we won. And so I am a Grammy award-winning artist and producer.
It's a little ironic for it to be work that you didn't even enjoy, but obviously it was quality work.
Yeah,
or at
it's
least
cool.
The voters believed it was quality work.
Yeah, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud, for a long time I didn't tell anybody about it for years. I just sort of kept it as like a weird secret. It wasn't until like 2 years ago that I actually admitted that it had ever happened. Also because the Joss thing was so contentious and tough, and I just sort of pretended that never happened as well. But it's still my work. I'm proud of it. I am a good producer. I'm an okay singer. I did my best.
Well, you're better than an okay singer. One, I've heard you saying it, 2, you've got an award for it. So there's probably no chance of ever hearing those 14 songs that didn't get put out, right?
Dude.
Like totally got shelved?
Totally got shelved. And
wow.
I actually, a few years ago, someone in Nashville, more than a few years ago, a handful of years ago, someone in Nashville was putting together something of my like songwriting catalog, because I've written with and for a bunch of other artists as well. And they wanted to include something from that collaboration. And I had the files. I didn't have what ended up being the mixes that weren't released, but I had the sessions. And so I mixed 2 of the tracks myself, and I had not listened to them in years. And I thought, God, this was actually really good. Like outside of the tough experience, we sound beautiful together. Joss is, an accomplished vocalist of her own. And the songwriting isn't my best work, but it's also not my worst work. And I realized that I was sort of like as happens in some songwriting collaborations, especially with like a dominant personality, I was just sort of like fitting myself to what the project of the day was, as opposed to like bringing, it's not Blue, right? It's like, it's not like the purest version of who I am, but it's still good. And I was like, it's a shame, sort of, that it didn't come out. Although it's like also one of those things where if it had come out, would I be known for that and then it not be like the thing that I'm the most proud of? I don't know. I don't, it's hard to reconcile that stuff.
Was it a challenge for you to write in that completely different style? I mean, for people that aren't familiar with Joss Stone, I'm only mildly familiar with her. She had a couple of radio hits, but it's kind of like a very R&B soulful kind of deal.
Yeah,
and that is
like
not what Friendship Commanders is.
No. So I think if anybody's ever heard my solo writing, it's not a crazy, I am not in any way a soul artist. Let me get out in front of that. I'm always a rock musician, but it is more songwritery, I guess, my solo stuff, while still being mostly electric. It wasn't difficult to write. I was the dominant writer, but Joss does turn everything into sort of an opportunity to riff, so there's a lot of like on the sessions, there's a lot of that happening. I don't tend to sing that way. So you see like the merging of these two identities and styles, which is cool. It's okay. There are worse things. I mean, that is what collaboration is supposed to be, but we wrote like 3 songs a day when we were writing. It was like it was like really intense. Like we were in like an intensive creative process. And then it was really the recording that undid us. The writing itself was whatever. Again, maybe not my best work, but it's fine. But the recording process was grueling and I think damaging.
That level of output, I mean, I don't write at a Nashville Song Factory, so that's a completely different thought to be able to churn out 3 songs a day. Do you ever revisit any of that, or is it just all lost to?
I revisited it when I was writing Conversations, that album and book, because I was telling those stories on that project. And it was good to tell the stories because it made the experience smaller. So one of the great things about thoroughly telling a story that's lived in like a sort of scary space in my life or taken up too much space is that it does lessen its real estate in my psyche. So which was good because while I was writing it and releasing it, Joss moved 10 miles away from me. She lives in Mount Juliet, Tennessee now. So now she's like my neighbor. So yeah, I mean, I don't really revisit it. The Grammys are around here somewhere and I just try to stay really present and like not get too hung up on any of that. I try to make the best work I can make right now,
I think that's what we all try to do. That's a really good way to look at it. You ever just call her up and go for coffee or no?
No. Also, Joss doesn't drink coffee, or she didn't when I worked. Okay. She didn't when I worked with her.
How could you be up all night and not drink coffee?
Dude, she was on the Red Bull, like all night. And I'll tell you, Red Bull is like its own bracket of substance. But no, I mean, she would actually be like, "You're so funny drinking your coffee," because she's British, so she just drinks PG tips. Yeah.
So I have a British co-writer. And
do you?
I do. This particular podcast is not about me, but I will tell this story to you because we're having a conversation. I met a British lady in Paris in the year 2000 when we were both very much younger. We made friends. We started writing together from our respective homes like in 2018. And we just dropped our first single. A second one's getting ready to come out, and we have a whole lot of songs. But the cultural differences are interesting challenge to work around.
100%. Like we're American. It's its own.
We like to argue about spelling.
Oh, they add a U to everything. Yeah, there's a lot of U's.
A lot of U's. In fact, she wrote a song called Superfluous You, because that's something I used to always say.
Yeah.
And she turned it into like a breakup song. Very cheeky and very clever, and I love it. I can't wait to release it. But yeah, I can relate to you a little bit by having to deal with a crazy Brit. I say crazy out of love. She's going to listen to this and think I'm messing with her.
Yes, I did not say that about Joss, for the
You did
legal
not.
record.
You did not, for the legal record.
In case she comes for me. Yeah,
So
no,
as,
I mean, cultural differences are interesting, and I think they can really serve a collaborative. I mean, Jerry and I are very different culturally, and Friendship Commanders, he's from here. He's a Southern white man, and I'm from Miami. So you know, we're very different and we bring different things to the project. But yeah, the English thing was interesting, and also being isolated was really interesting. Like just being on her turf was tough, you know.
how, I'm wondering, how long have you been in Nashville, and do you feel comfortable there? Because we both know there's a lot of things wrong with the business in that city.
I have been here over 10 years, and I don't know if I have ever felt comfortable here, but I've gotten more used to it, if that makes sense. Like the industry here is sort of unknowingly male dominated. Like they don't even notice. It's so normal to them that it doesn't even, when you talk about it, they're like, what's this woman raving about? You know? And I think sometimes even the women are like that. They don't even notice the imbalance. But yeah, it's very white. It's very male. And I honestly think that Friendship Commanders kind of exists because I'm not comfortable here. Like I feel like I started writing in that way because of tension.
Well, that's
Honestly.
good that it comes out and inspires your art.
Yeah.
If I didn't know, when I listened to that record, I would not say that's a Nashville band.
No, nobody
Like,
thinks that.
like it, that's not to lift a quote from Isabel. That's not the Nashville sound, right?
No.
So, since I'm assuming there's probably not a whole lot of people in town that sound like you, that probably makes you stand out a bit when you do local shows, no?
Yes, and we only play here like once a year. We're not like a band that's running around playing once a month in Nashville. And there are some rock bands that very much do that. We don't. We tend to tour and then play here once. Yeah, I mean, we're not the only heavy band at all. We do have some peers here, although some bands broke up during the pandemic. I would say we're the only band led by a woman in this particular lane that we're in, you know, not in heavy music, but in this sort of melodic sludge metal thing that we're doing. Yeah, I would say we're about it. And, you know, we do have some community here, and we do get some love kind of more in recent years than we did in the beginning, but we don't record here. Not really. Like during the pandemic, we did some stuff where we would you know, we'll track Jerry in this house, in this studio here, we'll track drums, but my rigs are too loud. So I'll go, you know, record guitars for a day at Sound Emporium, but we don't like work in Nashville with Nashville engineers because I am treated as secondary. So we tend to make our albums like Mass, we made in Massachusetts with Kurt Ballou, who's an amazing engineer and musician himself. And then the album before that is called Bill, and we made that at Electrical Audio in Chicago with Steve Albini.
That's a really good time to talk about something I saw on your Instagram.
Yeah.
How there was this particular story you told about someone wanting to compliment your songwriting, but offer the compliment to Jerry, who did not write the songs.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
And obviously you corrected this person. Was there like an apology, an acknowledgement? Like,
no, they think it's rude for women to claim their own credit. I think the women here think it's rude as well. So if somebody loves Friendship Commanders and comes to our posts and, you know, a post that I made, like, I think the one you're talking about related to an EP we released called Hold On to Yourself, where I talked about, is that what you're talking about?
I don't remember which one it was. I just remember the anecdote. You were in person and the person was talking to Jerry about the songs, and you were like, yeah, I wrote this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And,
yeah, that was about the Albini record. Yeah, that's actually, and they just were like, Jerry, you know, you got to tell us about working with Steve. And I was standing right there and I said, I wrote the album. And they just looked at me and kept talking to Jerry. And when I shared that story, that person unfollowed me on Instagram, which is about right. That's incredibly Nashville. They think that the men are the people fueling any of the work that they like. Many of the men that work here in session music that work for female artists, or, you know, have any sort of role in the work of female artists, like as an engineer or whatever, will share about the work while praising the other men on the project. She is an afterthought. That's very, very normal in Nashville. When we first started Friendship Commanders, a local drummer here who still knows Jerry and who still is part of the scene here came up to me at a venue and said, "How do you like playing Jerry's heavy music?"
When those are your songs?
100%.
Did you say, dude, those are my songs?
Of course. And he has never spoken to me again. So that's like,
it boggles,
that's how Nashville
honestly, it
is.
boggles my mind.
Yeah,
Like,
that's how
just-
Nashville is.
It's not acceptable.
No, it's insane. It's insane. And yet it's very normal. And you just get a reputation as being like a feminist buzzkill if you ever correct anybody. So here I lie, a feminist buzzkill. You know what I mean? Like,
But those are your songs. I mean, yeah, that would make me angry.
Yeah.
So how do you fix it? Or is there just no fixing it?
I shine light on it, you know, whenever I can. And I talk about it publicly because I think that that's the only thing that changes anything. And, you know, being disliked isn't the worst thing in the world. It really isn't. And being
No.
disliked by the wrong people
Well, that's
is maybe a compliment.
yeah, that is. You should hold that up like a banner. It's just hard for me to process somebody being like that.
Same.
Like,
Twilight Zone.
I guess sometimes it's hard to see past one's own experiences with music, especially since it means so much to all of us.
Yeah.
But if I relate to a piece of art, I'm not gonna like it less because a woman wrote it. And I'm definitely not gonna give somebody else credit for the woman's work. That why would
Same.
it doesn't compute.
I know. I spend a lot of time in this life, probably more than I should, wondering what the hell goes on with other people, because I can't relate to some tendencies that seem very natural to other people, you know, and that crosses a lot of topics. But I think the brass tacks of it is that we're just all not looking through the same lens. And so, you know, without trying to be hurtful or punitive, I do try to pretty regularly be like, if you're listening to Friendship Commanders, you're consuming work by a woman.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
I hate to burst your weird cultural bubble you're working on, but like, I have Trojan horsed work by a woman into your life.
Which it's I like the new album. I haven't listened to your old stuff. I will.
Thank you.
But I like the new album, and I don't like it less because you wrote it, and I didn't listen to it because you wrote it. I listened to it because I liked it.
Yeah.
And
Thanks. That's what we hope for.
right? I mean, as all of the songwriters, that's the only thing we're asking for is people
Yeah.
to engage with our art.
I would love to
openly.
not have to talk about my gender. I would love to not have, you know what I mean? Like, that would be great.
Right.
I
I would
didn't-
actually also not like to talk to you about it, but I think it's important to talk about it, which is why I wanted to
Yeah.
bring it up.
I didn't realize that was going to be on my bingo card for life, was like talking about my gender. But, you know, some of the choices that I've made, like moving to Nashville, have made it, and not just that. I mean, it's been present in my entire experience as a woman in music, but certainly in Nashville, it's like unstung for sure.
Do you get the same kind of, let's say you show up at a gig and you run into super chauvinistic sound dudes at gigs
All
you
the
play
time.
that won't listen to you when you're telling them about your setup?
Yeah, less so now because I am so direct. You know, I made a post yesterday about the fact that when I meet a sound person of any gender, I get right out in front of what is happening for the night and don't let them speak to Jerry first and ask him questions about the setup, which is a lot of people's tendency. And I tell them what I need and what we are, and I thank them so much. And I just try to be very direct and clear so that we don't have to have several rounds of like, why is the stage volume so loud? And then asking Jerry about, I mean, people used to be like, Dude, you want this DI in this bass? Like to Jerry, who's a drummer.
Yeah, it
You
makes
know,
some sense.
you might ask the person playing the rig about the rig. You know, just like a quick tip. I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but typically the person playing the rig knows about that rig. Nobody asks me about cymbal height. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or like if the tom should be mic'd or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I've had it from recording engineers, I've had it from sound people, I've had it from audience members, I've had it from our peers. It is deeply fatiguing, but oddly, when we released Mass, which we started releasing, so Blue came out in March. We did a 6-month rollout of this record, and the album came out September 29th. We did start to see a shift where, you know, we started getting messages on the band accounts, like to me, like, Buick, can you tell me about your guitar rigs? Buick, can you tell me about this song? It was the first time in the history of our band where people were looking at me as like the leader of the band. So that's new. That's new this year. And you messaged me. You messaged me directly. You didn't message the band. You emailed me.
I know how to read.
Interesting.
Interesting concept to read and pay attention, but yeah, I mean, I looked at all the material you had online, and you're the person that writes the songs and plays the guitar.
Yeah.
Why would I talk to the drummer? Unless I wanted to talk about drumming, but I don't, right? You know, I mean,
yeah.
It was, it's just really a shame that that's so rare. Like, that's like me, it's like, oh, who wrote this? Okay, Buick wrote this. She wrote the whole thing. Okay. Who plays the guitar? She's on tour. I should probably talk to her. That was like how my thought process went.
That's a good thought process.
It wasn't, where are the dudes in this band?
What man can I ask about this woman? Yeah, totally. I appreciate that. And here we are.
Now that we're back recording, I want to talk about your songwriting process. So it is Buick's time to sit down and write. What is the first tool that you reach for?
So my songwriting looks like hearing melodic stuff. So like usually riffs or vocal melodies. So I don't tend to sit down blank to write. In the case of writing that record with Joss, I did because I was like basically in like songwriting boot camp because I was over there, and that's just what it looked like, and probably also why it isn't my best work. But in real life, away from Joss, I hear stuff and then I sit down and try and figure out if it is in fact a guitar part or something that should happen vocally. But I always write on guitar, and I tend to write really quickly. So most of the music that I write is written in under an hour, like most of the songs that I write. The exception to that, especially on Mass, is the song Fail, which is the second track that I wrote about my friend Mark Orleans. That was written same way. Like I heard that the riff, and I played it for Jerry when I first wrote it, and I knew it was called Fail. I knew a little bit of the chorus, but I didn't hear the whole song in its entirety, and I had to wait kind of a while. That one came in dribs and drabs, but typically I sit down and I start messing around. For Mass, I actually tuned 2 of my guitars to different tunings. Well, 3 of my guitars, so that I would get out of any writing habits that I can be in. I think that for those of us that write a lot, you can get stuck in kind of like progression ruts, or just whatever you sort of grab for the same tool. So I tuned one guitar to a C tuning and one guitar to an F tuning. And then I already write in drop D. So I had a guitar in drop D and then one in standard. So I did write the record across 4 different tunings, which I think really benefited the writing process, but now means I'm touring with 3 guitars.
Yeah, so that's got to be a pain in the butt to do live.
Kind of, but you can't get around it. The C tunings and the F tuning, the guitars have to be set up for those. You can't be getting into those on stage, you know?
This makes me very glad to play an instrument right off, and that's the nonsense.
Right. Yeah, you can meet anyone where they are.
As long as they tell me what they're playing. I'm really not as good as figuring out a chord by ear as I should be at this point. So are you see, it sounds like you write the music first and then go to lyrics. Is that a correct
No, they happen
assessment?
together.
Together, okay.
They happen together. So I'll, you know, if I, like in the case of Blue, I remember writing that riff in that C tuning, and then I just will write a song right there. I'll just sit down, you know, once I have the riff, I'll listen to my own mind and what I think goes over it, and I'll just build it from there. I very rarely, if ever, I mean, maybe when I first was starting out as a songwriter, used to write like entire music structures and then later write some sort of lyrics, but I've, for 98% of my songwriting life, I've written them together.
How do you know when you're finished?
When I feel fatigued, like there's like a sort of emotional fatigue that comes over me where I feel like I hit it, you know, like, and not all songs do that. Some work is just process work where I'm just sort of going through ideas or whatever, and a song might be like a B minus, but it exists. Those don't tend to make the albums, you know.
Yeah.
But the ones that hit, I mean, I remember when I wrote Blue and I took it to Jerry and we were playing it in the rehearsal space, and it like took me down at the knees. I was like sobbing playing Blue as a band for the first time, because it was sort of the first time I was hearing myself say those things too. And it was powerful on a level that was surprising. A lot of Mass had that impact. And so I feel like when songs do that to me, I got it in that pass, you know what I mean, of the songwriting process. If it hurts my feelings, I always say, if the song hurts my feelings, I got it.
That's got to be hard to play when you go do a show then.
No, not anymore. Fail is really hard to play. Blue is really powerful to play. And if you see me live, I'm usually smiling during playing it. We close with it on this tour. But Fail is still really painful to play, because it's about somebody that's no longer here. And because there's a line in it where I say, I hope that you felt known, which I think is just one of these human experience things where like all any of us are really trying to do is be known and seen and heard by somebody else in this lifetime. And I'm not sure we're all doing a great job of that for each other. I'm going to say that right here and now. I'll speak for myself. Like that was one of the things that really knocked me down when Mark died. I was like, did I not tell this dude? Did I, you know, and I'm not saying that in an egocentric way, like that my love would have changed the course of anything. I respect his right to die. But it made me very acutely aware that like we do a crap job of making other people feel seen and known. I don't feel seen and known by many of the people in my life, certainly no one in my family except for my brother. And I don't want to be that person. And losing Mark really made me aware of who I definitely don't care about, but also who I do care about and who I want to be a better human being around and toward. And so every night that I say, I hope that you felt known, it's like I'm revisiting that idea, and also the regret that maybe he didn't, you know. When someone dies by suicide, it leaves a different wake, I think, than other losses.
It absolutely does. Well, it's those kind of feelings that makes a song real when you hear it.
Yeah.
Right. As much as it hurts us as musicians or as songwriters to say that stuff, right? We say it because other people maybe don't have the ability to. So
yeah,
comes with the job. Do you approach songwriting differently when it's a co-write versus when you're writing on your own? And if so, how?
100%. Yeah. So if I'm co-writing, it usually means that I'm writing for them. So like it's their project that the music will end up being part of. The slight difference in that arena was the project with Joss, but even still, as I said, she's gone. Joss doesn't play an instrument. So I had to carry all of that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she can, but does not play bass. Like, when I say can, I mean that she's a natural musician. She's never played bass in any context, but she has, that natural sort of tendency. But she doesn't write on an instrument. So when you write with someone like Joss, and I've written with a lot of songwriters that don't play, you are carrying the weight of what else is happening other than vocals. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I'm not going to lie to you. But typically when I write for other people, I'm writing for them, and I'm really listening to them instead of listening to just myself, which is how I write for my stuff and for Friendship Commanders. I wrote some stuff for this artist here in Nashville, with her, for this artist here in Nashville a couple of years ago named Mia Morris, who's like a multi-instrumentalist. She's primarily actually a drummer, but she can play lots of stuff. And she was 17 when we were writing these songs. So she was like writing songs about not feeling like she fit in high school, and topics that I remember, but are not where I live right now. So, it was about like listening not only to her experience, but also to her tendencies as an artist, where her sort of melodies went, and then trying to meet her there and then take it somewhere else, and be like, what if the chorus jumped up over here? And we had a lot of ease writing together, and that's a lucky break when that happens. Sometimes it's a lot of like, no, 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 no. And you're like, well, okay, it's great that we don't know what we want, but what do we want? And when people don't play instruments, that does get trickier actually, because they can't necessarily explain to you what they're looking to do. So it's a lot of trial and error. But yeah, I'd say the primary difference is that I'm listening to other people as opposed to just listening to what my own brain is doing. I tune in when we need a new part to myself, but mostly I'm trying to listen to you.
When you write, do you know at the beginning of do you know when you start whether it's going to be a Friendship Commander song or a Buick Audra solo song, or does that become apparent in the process?
Most of the time. Usually if I'm playing a riff and drop D in 7/4, it's for Friendship Commanders. And as you said, that song's called Vampire. But
I dig it.
Thank you. Yeah. The sort of really riff heavy stuff, although I am a riff writer in both projects, but yeah, honestly, also the subject matter really is different. Like Friendship Commanders, I tend to write from this place of strength and introspection. And for my solo stuff, I tend to be a little more bare in a different way, and a little bit less, I don't know. The word isn't vulnerability, but there is a different tendency that comes in. There's like it's like I look through a slightly different lens. I will say that the exception to this was a song called July's Revelations. That was just this song about sort of realizing that I have entered into a lot of relationships in my life with people who can't see me. They can only see themselves. So it circles back to the thing that I was talking about with Fail and Mark Orleans. Like, I have been in relationship with a lot of people who have like deeply narcissistic tendencies. And when you're in relationships like that, it's incredibly lonely. So, like the chorus of that song is, if I call you, can you hear me, or can you only hear yourself? And I thought it was just a Buick Audra song, and I thought it was a Process song, like a throwaway song. And I played it for Jerry, and he said, we're going to record that as Friendship Commanders. And I was like, the hell we are, and he was like, no, it belongs on Friendship Commanders stuff. And so it closes our 2020 EP, Hold On to Yourself. But that's rare. That's rare that something would jump over the aisle.
So my favorite lyric on the new record is, there's no speaking up when everybody wants the status to be quo.
Oh, thank you. Hi, son.
Yeah, that's not exactly happy.
No.
I almost want to ask you, how'd you come up with that line? That's a really good line. You know how you listen to something, you're like, man, I wish I'd written that one. That's one of the ones I'm like, yeah, that's kind of wish I'd written that lyric.
Hearing that from another songwriter, that means a lot, because I also wish I wrote certain lyrics. Yeah, so High Sun is specifically about this scenario that happened in Boston. And I get into this in the book, where I had this sort of best friendship, I'm using air quotes for our listeners, with this older woman who was very, very dominant as an energy in our relationship, and just really did some damaging sort of shaping things to me when I was really young, like 19, 20, and was like constantly critical of my weight, my self-presentation, the way that I sang. I mean, she really came for everything in my life and tried to kind of mentor me into being, I think, more like her, almost like I was her pet or something. And the strange thing about it was that a lot of people watched it happen. A lot of people watched it happen in the Boston music scene. She was 7 years older than me. When you're 20 and 27, that's a jump. You know what I mean? Like, those are different life brackets, I think. And when I finally kind of stood up for myself years later and broke out of that dynamic, I was excommunicated from the Boston music scene. And those people let that happen too. And High Sun was really the place where I was like, scapegoating is scapegoating is scapegoating. It happens in all different types of contexts in our life. It happens in family dynamics and professional dynamics, obviously in cliques and music circles and other cultural pockets. And writing High Sun was really me being like, these things that happened to me as a kid, these roles that I played as a kid, were very easy for me to play as a young adult. And nobody in an abuse scenario like that typically has the courage to stand up and be like, what are you doing to that young person? You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing over there to that person? And I try to be that person. I cannot stand bullies. Apparently that's been true since I was a kid. I've had a lot of people reach out and tell me that, like, I walked up to their bully when we were in like grade school and like told them off, which are things I don't remember. But Jared's like, it sounds like your work though. Sounds familiar. I can't stand it, but we're not always in situations when we're the one being injured where somebody else is going to say, like, what's going on with this damaging dynamic, And so High Sun was me saying that. And there's no speaking up when everybody wants the status to be quo was like, I find that to be true again and again. I mean, we find entire cultures being abused and nobody will say it out loud. Here we live,
Here we live where other people used to live.
Yeah, here we live on this land. Here we are in these roles. And
here I am. My ancestors were not from here, and they were brought here against their will.
Precisely, right? And we sort of decide as a people in large ways and small that these things are okay, and that talking about them is sort of disruptive. But how else does change happen? You know what I mean? If no one is courageous, if no one is loud, I guess.
When did you start playing guitar?
When I was 20.
Late bloomer.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I was 20, 21 before I started. We have a lot in common. That's so weird. How long did it take you to go from learning guitar to when you wrote your first song?
That day. So I just
awesome.
that day, I was so ready to be writing music in a band that it all happened on the same day. And I actually wrote the first song in my first band vocally and then taught it to myself. And I wrote the bass player's parts too, vocally, and then taught them to us. And that's how I became a guitar player.
Nice.
Yeah. It always starts with riffs.
I have never been able to do that. And that's one of the things that I would like to be better at as a musician. It's composing riffs. That is like a hole in my skill set. I have a lot of holes in my skill set, but that's one of the big ones. How long did it take you before you knew that your songs were good enough to share with other people?
I don't know that I went through that. I just knew that I was a songwriter even before I wrote songs. It's odd to say out loud now, but I knew that was where I belonged. And I think that I had the gift of youthful courage on my side when I was 20 and I was knew how to play maybe 2 chords and I was out playing shows. when I first started playing guitar, I didn't even know chords. I literally was just playing single note melody lines, but I think I always was like, I belong here. It's just a question of how, and it's funny, like in recent years, I struggle much more with my own worth and my own sense of, do I have the right to be out here doing this than I did when I was 20 and I knew 2 chords. So
I
don't
think
know what
part of
that's
that's
about.
maturity. Like the older you get, the more you realize you don't know anything.
Yeah, you don't know anything, but also it's like, I do think that for anyone that is not a cishet white man, we are given so many opportunities to not believe in ourselves, aren't we? Like along the way, that becomes cumulative as well, and builds up in the system. And I think is another thing that constantly has to be dragged out into daylight and double checked, because I mean, I've been told I'm not good enough to play by easily 50 people, including Joss Stone. Joss Stone said to me, "You're not good enough to sing your own songs." She said it. She said it out loud in front of our lawyers.
Whoa.
Yeah. So,
Well, that's weird because I think you sing really well. I've been told that too, by the way, but I don't sing really well. So I am objective enough to recognize that.
No, she's mean for the sake of being mean, when she wants to be. So that's why we don't have coffee now that we live 10 minutes apart, because
that makes sense.
Anybody who says that kind of thing to you is operating from a belief system that is not compatible with mine.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Even if you believe that, you shouldn't say that to somebody.
The audacity. Can you imagine? Can you imagine saying that?
It's just mean.
Yeah, on purpose.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you the questions I ask every guest.
Great.
The first one is, if you think back as far as you can remember, what is the first song you can remember hearing in your whole life?
It was probably by either of my biological parents, but the first one that I remember loving and knowing was Sailing by Christopher Cross.
Oh yeah, I know that one. I don't remember when that came out, and I'm going to Google it and find out what year that came out.
I don't know. But I mean, it was that when all of us were little kids, like all of us grew up with it because it's been out forever.
1979.
Yeah, I think so my biological parents are both songwriters. So probably their music. And also I grew up around Fred Neil, who wrote Everybody's Talking.
That one I don't know.
Everybody's talking at me. I can't hear a word they're saying. Harry Nilsson made it famous. It was a Midnight Cowboy.
Haven't seen that one. Sounds good when you sing it though.
Well, thank you. It's a legendary song that a lot of people don't know was written by a man named Fred Neil, who died in relative obscurity in the Florida Keys. But he was a great songwriter, and he was one of my mom's closest friends when I was little. So I grew up around a lot of songwriting, but the first song that I remember being, aware of by outside people was probably Sailing.
Next question. What did your childhood smell like?
Oh, God. So I grew up in a million different places, but some of which were in Miami. A lot of agricultural, citrusy mango tree smells.
That is so foreign to me as a Midwesterner.
What city are you in?
Dayton, Ohio. We do not have citrus.
Oh yeah. Wait, I don't even know what the agriculture is in Dayton, Ohio.
Corn, soybeans. If fruit trees, apples will grow here.
Delightful.
There's one species of peach that grows in Ohio real well. Little tiny donut little peaches, but the big ones don't grow here so well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. How's your Spanish, since you spent a lot of time in Miami?
It used to be pretty good. Now it's kind of garbage. Do you speak Spanish?
I do.
Nice.
And I figured that if you were in Miami a long time, I don't know how you can grow up there and not at least have a passing working knowledge of it, just because of how many people there are that speak it there.
Indeed. I mean, it was such a dominant language that, many, if not most of my friends were from Spanish speaking homes. And it's interesting to think about now, because I didn't start taking Spanish probably until middle school, but being in their homes as a kid, I knew what their parents were saying to them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's the way that humans are supposed to learn language, right? We learn as children
immersive
through osmosis. So yeah, if you hung out with Spanish speaking kids, you would know what people were saying. So that's why I was wondering. So we could drop you off in like Peru and you'd be fine, is what I'm saying.
Maybe. And interestingly too, Miami is like all of those kids that I grew up with were from different Spanish speaking cultures. So a lot of South American kids, some Cuban kids, some Puerto Rican kids. It was not all like one, you know, Miami has this weird rap of being like dominantly
A Cuban
Cuban,
town,
but
yeah.
I grew up with a ton of Haitian kids, like, you know, it's not quite as like as all Cuban. My stepmother's Cuban, but I grew up with a lot of kids from different countries that were, or their families were from different countries, you know.
That
A lot of
means you got
Colombian
You
kids.
got exposed to a lot of really good food at a young age.
A lot. Although no Mexican food. I don't think I grew up with a single Mexican person.
I mean, yeah, that's Miami. I'm not surprised. But
And a lot of
else,
Jewish kids.
Everybody else has that though. So
Yeah.
like everywhere else you go, you'll find a lot of Mexican folks.
Including here in Nashville. A lot.
Including there in Nashville.
Yeah.
It's interesting how, like, in our area, we have a lot of Mexicans, Guatemalans, almost
Sure.
no Cubans. So if I want Cuban food, I gotta like go to Louisville. That's like the next closest place that has a whole lot of Cuban people.
Yeah.
Really kind of sad because I love Cuban food.
Yeah, Cuban food is incredible.
So you've been on tour more than once. You've seen a lot more of this country than most of us. Do you have a favorite place to visit and go play?
Oh gosh, we get asked this a lot.
Oh, but I'm sorry for not being more creative.
No, I feel like it's changing. Like it used to be the Pacific Northwest. I used to like going up there, but now I would say that I love parts of Texas, which is such a wild. I don't know that I ever would have predicted that, but Texas has
Which parts one has, because Texas has got a lot of parts.
It's a huge, it's like
It's
Florida
massive, yeah.
in that could just be its own nation. I really like Houston and I really like parts of Dallas. Dallas is also like a weird intersection of a bunch of different neighborhoods, but yeah, I like, and honestly playing Boston on this tour was really oddly cool. I didn't know how that would go because the album is about my time in Boston. And I thought, Jesus, these people are gonna like, no one's gonna come. You know, I wrote this whole record about how weird it was there. And it was a beautiful show. So maybe it's possible to have new experiences in old places. Like, I don't know. That was pretty interesting.
Did folks from the community that you had back then, did some of those folks come out and see the show? Or how they engaged with the album?
Not the ones that were like directly involved. In fact, they've all been very quiet. But people who were peripheral, yeah, they did come out and have read the book, and it's lovely to have them, you know, in my extended circle now.
Cool. So I'm only going to ask this question because I hate it when people ask me, and it's just kind of like a pay it forward, but like in a bad way.
Oh no!
I know I'm a terrible person. I'm asking this ironically. It's just because I think I'm not a journalist, but I think it's a lazy question for a journalist to ask a musician, and it bugs me. So I would like to inflict this dishonor on other people just because I can. And that question is, so what's next for you?
So, you know, Friendship Commanders is going to tour the hell out of this record next year as well. I've already started writing our new stuff, and we don't exactly know what kind of body of work that will be, if it will be a shorter release like an EP or if it will be a full length. But we're playing some of the brand new stuff live actually on this tour. So if you're seeing us on the road, yeah, you're hearing brand new stuff. And I have a small body of work that I've been working on in fits and starts called Adult Child that I've been chipping away at. So maybe that'll come out early next year. But yeah, I'm just trying to tell these stories and stay upright and learn new things about myself and the world.
Awesome. Where should we send people to connect with you online, on social, or on the internet? How can people follow your story, listen to your music, all that good stuff? This is the marketing and promotion portion of the conversation.
So Friendship Commanders can be found at Friendship Commanders everywhere except Twitter, which for some reason didn't let us have that long of a title. So we're at F Commanders on Twitter, or X, or whatever the hell Elon Musk is calling it now. Will we always call it Twitter? Will it be like Kinko's?
I will always call it Twitter. Just like how Chicagoans will always call whatever they're calling the Sears Tower now, the Sears Tower.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know the app I'm talking about. I am at Buick Audra everywhere, and I have the weirdest name, honestly, in the world, so you can't miss it. It's BuickAudra.
Do I get points for not making any jokes about your name?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I've
You're
been really trying not to.
you're ahead of the curve on that. And most men actually have a really hard time not making
I
fun
figure
of
you've
me.
heard them all. So
Yeah. I
what
mean,
was
I think I'd heard them all by the time I was like 9, you know. Um, yeah, my name is Buick Audra, and yeah, I've written 2 books. You can find them on my website. I've made a bunch of music across many different projects, but I'm really grateful to be playing in Friendship Commanders right now. And thank you, Mike, so much for finding me and for asking me to do this. And thank you also for being so flexible. I'm sorry that it took me a couple days to get it together here.
It's all good. You're busy. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, for trusting that I wasn't going to be super creepy because you didn't know me yet. And I wish you really the best on the rest of the tour. And I hope you swing by Ohio in the future again, but closer to where I lived in Akron. And because I really want to catch a show.
We would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks once again to Buick Audra for taking time out of her weekend. Really, dear listener, she took time during a break in tour when she probably had to do laundry and all kind of errands, and she spent a couple of hours talking to me, and I really appreciate that. Buick, you are awesome. Thank you, dear listener, for being here, and you really should check out the Friendship Commanders album Mass. I like it. You'll probably like it. Next week on the podcast, more episodes that I procrastinated getting out. You're going to meet a couple of more interesting musicians that I really admire. Come on back.